This is Mitch Stone, and the story is Confessions of a Middle-Aged Beginner.
A few years ago, somebody asked me an odd question. Do you like music? Do you like music? Do you like to eat food? Do you like to breathe air? Seriously, that's what I was thinking, but I had the momentary presence of mind to not blurt out. Instead, an awkward pause. Sure. For years, this question stuck with me, and I couldn't think of a better or more diplomatic answer. You know the real question being asked, don't you? It's, do you like the kind of music I like? And you better know what kind of music they like if you want to avoid any more of those awkward pauses. Well, of course I like music. Even though it wasn't a huge part of my life growing up, nobody in my immediate family played an instrument or sung, not even in the shower. Well, my uncle supposedly played the drums, but that was almost never discussed as if it was maybe vaguely disgraceful. Not that my parents didn't have musical hopes for me. Why they did is the question, and a mystery that remained with me for years. Finally, I think I have the answer. We didn't have a lot of lore in my family, but growing up I was aware of a great aunt Blanche, who I was told was a concert violinist. Imagine that, among all the matzo ball soup making New York grandmothers and great aunts, a concert violinist. Blanche came up often enough in dinner table conversation for me to know that she was far and away the most exotic member of my family. I never actually met Aunt Blanche, and for good reasons, as it turned out. Long before I was born, Blanche moved to California, and as I learned much later, married a Russian concert violinist, quite a bit older than herself, divorced no less, who played in the LA Philharmonic. It must have been a bit of a family scandal at the time, but also kind of exciting. My dad visited Blanche when he was on leave from the Army during the war, and it was a story often repeated. So without saying as much, my parents were telling me that Blanche was our family model for musical culture. So finally it occurs to me. When our first instrument was pressed into my hands in grade school, it had to be the violin. I'm not sure, but maybe my parents were hoping that a talent for the instrument lurked somewhere deep in our family gene pool. Thanks, of course, to Aunt Blanche. Well, a talent for the violin must be a recessive trait. Did you know the violin has no frets? This means you need something close to perfect pitch to produce more than a screechy racket from the thing. Suffice to say, the violin and I did not get on. The trumpet was next. I don't remember exactly why I gave that one up, but it might have had something to do with spit valves. Do you like music? Sure, just don't ask me to play anything except on the radio. It took me decades to understand this, but not every instrument is right for every person. And no question being exposed to the wrong instruments put me off playing one since grade school. That experience, it seems, turned me into a passive consumer of music. But it also turns out the message was right. I simply hadn't understood it. And the message is, if you like music, no matter what kind you like, no form of listening can ever compare to actually playing it. The desire was always there, but it was a void in my life that I'd almost given up trying to fill. Then, just when it seemed as if I'd never have an instrument to call my own, I discovered the ukulele. Let me tell you about the ukulele. First off, I am pronouncing it wrongly, as most of us hey-oles do. The correct Hawaiian pronunciation is ukulele. In Hawaiian, this translates as jumping flea. That's the name the islanders gave the instrument when it was brought to them by the Portuguese. The ukulele jumped off the islands to become huge in popular culture during the 20s. But by the 60s, when I was struggling with the violin and trumpet, it was treated as a joke instrument. At at least on the mainland, kept barely alive by corny old-timers. Maybe you remember Arthur Godfrey flogging his plastic toy ukuleles on TV in the 50s. Well, then in the 60s, we had Tiny Tim. His contribution to the ukulele was turning a perfectly respectable instrument into total camp. Is he gone yet? He's still there. Any instrument that can survive that kind of assault has something going for it. Over the last 10 years or so, the ukulele's reputation was rescued by some really great players, who, if you ever heard the beauty they ring out of this tiny instrument, you'd never think of the ukulele as corny or campy again. As a music lover, they sure got my attention, but at the same time, those players are so good, it could put you off the idea of ever trying it yourself. So that brings me to a scary statistic. Do you know how long it takes to become an expert at something? According to, well, the experts, it takes about 10,000 hours. Think of that as a 40-hour-a-week job for 5 years. In other words, make it a full-time job for that long. So right away, it's tempting to learn anything new, especially after a certain age, seems like a fool's errand. Then again, who needs to become an expert? Proficiency, or so say the proficient, can be accomplished in around 100 hours. I learned to fly an airplane in less time than that, so maybe this is not such a far-fetched idea. Think of it as an hour a day for a few months, and suddenly it all seems so doable. And one of the special features of the ukulele is its simplicity. Only 4 strings, 2 less than a guitar, with frets. If you can learn a form and remember about 10 or 12 chords, all of them requiring no more than 3 fingers, you can play dozens of songs. Maybe not very well at first, but well enough for the positive reinforcement you need to keep at it. And then there's the sound. It is joyful and sweet. As George Harrison said, it is one instrument you can't play and not laugh. He wasn't the only great musician who used the ukulele as their musical vacations. But for all its virtues, my first attempts to play the ukulele were a little better than my grade school assaults on the violin and trumpet. I picked it up and put it down more than once, having made little progress. Then 2 things happened. First, I met the enthusiastic players of the local ukulele club. They are the experts. But they're also willing to be patient teachers and mentors of a determined duffer such as myself. With their advice and encouragement and the incentive of our monthly meetings, I sit down and play at least a little nearly every day. I've been doing that for about a year now. It started out as work, but gradually it became fun. Between the encouragement and the daily playing, I've made some progress. I will never become an expert player. I was reconciled to that from the very start. Instead, I've learned the satisfaction of filling this part of my life with basic proficiency. And so for the first time since I was about 10 years old, I can honestly say I play an instrument. So do you like music? Finally, I have my answer. You bet, and I can even play some of it on the ukulele. And what do you know, maybe after all, somewhere deep in my genetic code, I inherited just a little bit of Aunt Blanche. So this one's going to be for her. It's called Can't Help Falling in Love. Wise men say only fools rush in, but I can't help falling in love with you. Shall I stay? Would it be a sin if I can't help falling in love with you? Like a river flows surely to the sea, so